Hello and welcome back to Open Comments with me, Ash. Today we are joined by Jesal Pankhania, born and bred in the Midlands, UK, and married with 2 teenagers. Jesal has 3 working roles: implant dentist, university clinical tutor at the BAM School of Dentistry, and as an essentialist coach, helping people explore what matters most to them. He is a thinker, writer, and community-minded leader who lives at the intersection of philosophy and practice. Jesal explores themes like power, humility, devotion, and responsibility, and aims for depth and clarity in his work. Whether reflecting on spiritual traditions, governance, or personal growth, he has a special interest in drawing out universal truths and making them practical. He is interested in exploring not just how we succeed, but who we become in the process. Thank you, Jesal, for joining us on Open Comments.
Thank you, Ash. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So to start off with, in your book, Hard Road to Wisdom, you explore how vice can pave the way to virtue. How does that idea connect to the concept of lifelong learning?
Yeah, that's a good question. Lifelong learning, as I'm sure you're aware, is a big part of well-being. So we have physical well-being, mental well-being, and lifelong learning is part of that. And yes, you could say that lifelong learning might include, doing a degree or a diploma or master's or something like that. But actually, if we're not learning from maybe mistakes or learning the deeper lessons, how virtue plays out long term and how vice plays out long term, then are we really learning? So as part of lifelong learning, yes, it's key, it's central. I'd call it most essential. It's at the core of learning, I would say. It's where wisdom lies.
Thank you. And do you see mistakes and vices as part of an informal education system that shapes who we become?
Yeah, good. So informal education system, that's an interesting way of just saying what we learn from life, isn't it? Informal education system. So if we look at what a formal education system gives us, it gives us like the skills to go and work in the world. It gives us the intellect to be able to navigate, maybe jobs or social hierarchy, shall we say. Understanding virtue, vice, and things like that helps us navigate people, helps us navigate and even balance the head and the heart. Like an informal education system is what we catch in between lessons, isn't it? Like you go at school, we went to maths and we went to English, then we went to science. But what happens in the corridors, right? Which kids do we need to avoid? Which kids do we need to hang around with so we don't get maybe picked on? Or which kids are better to hang around with and are more fun? That's the informal bit, right? What's in between the formal. So the informal actually forms the inner self, I think. Again, I'm going to say that again, the inner essential self, the core self. That informal education is it's the culture. It's the culture that we're in, and it develops our character.
And you've immersed yourself in philosophy, yoga, and healthcare. What drives your hunger to keep on learning?
What drives my hunger to keep on learning? I think I just have a curiosity. I think it's just like an innate thing. I always try and look at things at how something could maybe work better. I'm very kind of strategic, and I'll look at, okay, how can something be productive, effective, efficient, proficient? This is how I teach my students. Like they come day one and they can't even hold a drill, right? And then I've got to teach them how to drill a tooth. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's just be productive first. Let's do things correctly. And then from productive, we become effective, and then efficient, and then proficient. So it's kind of like an evolution. So I'm always looking at the world like that. Okay, how can we make things a little bit better? So whether that's on the physical or metaphysical level, I think it's just been innate within me. So that drives me then. That drives me.
Would you say as well on that note that you're very focus driven in terms of also how you see process, so process driven as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, making things more efficient is process. I like to think of growth in three ways. You've got up, outwards, and then down, depth. When we're getting broader growth is like knowing more, being broad-minded. But then we've also got, growing in height means people might define that as success.
Yes.
In the world. But then depth is that growth as well. So, I think that's the key thing, because if you think about a tree, the analogy I always give is a tree is the deeper the roots are, the higher the tree can grow, right? So actually that growth is, again, I'd say most important.
And moving on to staying motivated on the hard road, how do you distinguish between a struggle that's helping you grow versus one that's draining you?
So again, the metaphor of the butterfly comes into effect here. So when the caterpillar is turning into the butterfly, there needs to be a little bit of struggle for the wings to become strong so that the butterfly can fly eventually. But if we kind of think about someone who's going to the gym and they've never been before, and you just put the weights right up to the max, it's demoralizing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So we want to start small steps. Enough support and enough challenge is the ideal kind of scenario for growth.
Yes.
If we don't have enough challenge, you kind of just stay in the status quo and just stay in your comfort zone. Too much challenge and you're demoralized and you don't want to go back again. You don't want to approach that. So I think the right balance between that support and challenge, and you can scaffold your way up.
And to stay on that question, how would you say you can assess balance, but also if the way in which you look at balance may change, how do you pivot and change that, if that makes sense?
So is it all right if I share a little story?
Of course, yes.
It's about balance. So once I met this yogi in India, I remember it was like 11 o'clock at night, clear sky, there was a full moon out. I distinctly remember that. And he stopped me and he was talking about balance.
Okay.
And I was in my early 20s, and he was just saying, okay, what do you need to balance in your life? And I was like, your relationships, your career, your education, your family life, the classic things you need to balance. And then he kind of just held his hand up and just said, I bet you think balance is like this. And he just held his hand up straight. And I said, well, yeah, that's balance. He goes, yeah, you're not leaning too far left, not leaning too far right. And I was like, yeah, I suppose that is what I feel like balance is. And then he said, no, but balance is like this. And he leaned his hand left and he said, and balance is like this. And he moved his hand to the right. And I was looking at him and he said, it's like when life turns a corner. So he said, when you look at a cyclist,
yes,
if you look at a cyclist, when they're turning the corner, they're leaning. And sometimes they're leaning a lot, but they're still balanced. Yeah. So this is where wisdom comes in and the idea of virtue and vice. Because actually overplaying some virtues can actually become vicious. It can actually turn into a vice. So wisdom is actually knowing when to hold off and when to, turn things on. So it's like that. Or let's say we're going through life and someone's ill and maybe terminally ill. So you're like, well, everything else really needs to go on hold. And I need to lean towards spending time with this person. So actually that's still balanced. So we might think we quantify it sometimes by time, how much time we're putting into everything. But actually sometimes life makes us lean, but it is still balanced.
Yes. And what role does discipline play versus passion when it comes to long-term development?
So discipline is obviously important, but discipline, if we're too stoic or if we're over-disciplined, we can kind of lose heart. So like when you were saying passion, discipline and passion are, a little bit, there's a bit of polarity there between discipline and passion. So passion is always like the heart. So when we become too disciplined, we can lose our heart. In the long term, discipline is required to kind of stay on track, have the right habits and all that sort of stuff. But actually, if you're passionate about something, you don't actually need discipline. Because if you have a passion, like that means emotion, right? So you have the internal motion, you have the motivation. You don't necessarily have to cognitively say, right, I need to be disciplined. Normally, if we're having to be disciplined, it's because there are other things that are pulling us away, so we have to remain disciplined. But a strong passion, we wake up and we just do it. We don't even have to think about being disciplined. So
it's automatic. Yes,
it's automatic. Yeah. So passion actually overrides discipline. Discipline is there when we kind of either we run out of passion, or the passion just isn't there, and we have to, it's like the donkey and the carrot or the stick, right? That's discipline.
Yeah. Would you say it kind of works? I like what you said there. It kind of works as a double-edged sword almost, in terms of if you don't have passion, you may still have that discipline, but you're still following that structure, but you may not be passionate about what you do, right? As an example. So although you're doing, like, say, a routine that you've done for years, you may have lost that passion along the way, but you're still going to do that routine because it feels safe, it feels comfortable, it's automatic, but you don't feel anything towards it anymore. So it's interesting that you can have both at the same time. One may, come into effect more or have more of a stronger presence, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing for you then. As much as structure is good, if you don't have passion behind it, it's like, what is your purpose? What are you working towards? You may feel a bit empty inside, but you're still gonna do that structure or do that routine because you're comfortable with it. It's something that you've known for quite some time.
Yeah, and it is that metaphor of the Tin Man on Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Right, he's looking for his heart, right? So what you've just described there is someone who's just doing something so monotonously, so robotically, and they've lost their motion, they've lost their emotion and passion. So they're looking for their heart. So it's like, okay, either we have to rekindle it, or we have to think of a new passion. Or sometimes, like, there's this idea of ikigai, like, okay, you can find a job that has your passion as well, but sometimes that's not realistic. So sometimes you do just have to do something robotically to have some utility in life, and make a bit of honey at work, right? But then have some sort of passion that you do in the evenings or at the weekend, so you do have that balance between the disciplines and the passions.
Yeah, I think also stepping out of one's comfort zone and going through change can be not only daunting but very uncomfortable, but that can actually help us. So for example, if we've, one of our routines isn't really serving us anymore, but we're doing it because it's automatic and we're comfortable, but then we're moving to something completely new and we're very out of our depth and we're trying it, but we're like, not really sure, will I stick with it? But the more we do it, we feel more comfortable, because if we're not used to something, but the more we practice, like, I don't know, playing piano or playing guitar, or I'm going down the musical route here, but it can be anything, right? Practice makes perfect, as cheesy as it sounds, but I think that is definitely true.
Yeah, so to reflect on that, this is what I share with my students as well, dental students, especially when I'm teaching them a new procedure, right? So think about concentric circles, where the inner circle is the comfort zone, and then the next circle outside that is the learning zone, and the next circle outside that is the panic zone.
Okay.
So if we're in the comfort zone, we're not really learning anything. That's where certainty lies, right? But actually, we have to step out of our comfort zone, go into uncertainty, but not so far that we're in a panic state, maybe close to it. And sometimes we might get panicked, I've never done this before, but then you learn something in that. You might learn 50% of what you need to know. Then you do it again, then you've got 75%. And then before you know it, you become proficient or, effective at it. And then your comfort zone has expanded.
By being in that situation. Gotcha.
Yeah. So your comfort zone now is bigger and you can actually do more than you could before.
Yes.
Because you've stepped into the learning zone.
Do you think with that as well, that helps with awareness by opening your mind up a bit more as well? If something, something's comfortable and you're going into that situation, whether it's like trying a new skill or practicing something new, at first you might be hesitant because you're going to think to yourself, oh, maybe I'm not going to be very good, or it's going to affect A, B, and C, or the people around me are going to think that, I'm this way, etc., etc. But by doing something, as you say, you have more of awareness after, and just sitting in that in that little bit of uncomfortableness can actually help more as opposed to playing it a bit too safe. I don't think that's always the case, but I think that can help.
Yeah, I kind of say this to my coaching clients. There's a difference between disease and dis-ease.
Interesting. Yes. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So like what you're saying, we feel uneasy.
Yes.
We feel uneasy when we're doing something new, right? But doing it often and all that sort of stuff helps our competence.
Yes.
So we're going from that unconscious, incompetent state. And then you said like awareness.
Yes.
I'm aware that I'm incompetent. And then you start working out what you can become more competent at.
Yes.
And then you develop competence.
Yes.
So it's like that. Yeah. So it's all about awareness. Yes. 100%. I agree with you.
And how has following your own path shaped your understanding of virtue and vice?
Yeah. So how has my own understanding? So could you ask the question once more? So I just put my brain into gear. Thanks.
Okay. And how has following your own path shaped your understanding of virtue and vice?
Okay, right. So I was brought up in a family which is very spiritual. So we were given like spiritual ideals, should we say. In Sanskrit, tapa socham daya satyam, which means tapa means discipline or self-mastery. Socham means like cleanliness, clean mind, body and words. Daya means compassion. And then satya means truthfulness. So in a sense, have been brought up with a very clean set of ideals. But actually, you go through your teenage years, you go through a rebellious stage, you meet friends, you meet families that don't have these ideals. And actually it's sometimes a bit more fun.
Yeah.
And some of these vice, they are fun to a degree, obviously, if they're not malevolent. So if you're asking about my own life, it's been more on that cleaner side. But then there's a risk, and I say this in my book, Hard Road to Wisdom, that there are two prisons. There's the prison of vice itself, but there's a prison of virtue, because you can become self-righteous. Because when you kind of, everything's clean, you're doing well, and then you can potentially judge others. Yeah, and you think you're holier than thou. So that's also a psychic prison. That's also your virtues then become a vice, because you develop arrogance. So this is the type of thing that I've seen, is that people who are, living on the lighter side of life, they don't necessarily have these bad habits. We can sometimes judge too easily, too quickly. So from my point of view, I have seen people succeed and then fail really badly. And actually, I've then had to bring in that non-judgmental side, that compassionate side, and actually gone, this person still has value. Which is why I interviewed the people that I interviewed, because I wanted to show that recovery is possible.
Yes.
And that actually these people are probably more wise, having gone through the struggles and then come back, rather than me theoretically saying things.
Yes.
Let people speak about their struggles of, drug addiction, gambling, severe adversity, gang problems, crime, criminality, that sort of thing. And actually when they speak from a different type of wisdom. And that's, for me, that's more important.
Would you say as well, because it's coming from them directly, like it can be, I don't want to say necessarily easy, but say if you were to, interview these individuals in a way that you may say, like, this is what we want to get out of the interview, this is what we're going to share, as opposed to saying, right, please share your stories, and it'll be as they've said it almost. It's quite different, because it's one of those where, I think I may have mentioned this before, but vulnerability is obviously key, but when it's coming directly from them, because it's their own story, they can say it at their own pace, but also it just feels more, I think, natural, if that's the best word to use, maybe.
Yeah, I think natural, definitely. I think they're realized words. That's what they are.
Okay.
So there's knowledge, like you can know stats and you can know things like that. But if you've got a testimony,
Yes.
that's what we're talking about, isn't it? It's someone's actual testimony. Going back to Sanskrit and philosophy, which I love, gyan means knowledge, but then vigyan means realized knowledge.
Okay.
Knowledge that you have experienced to be true. So when someone speaks from that situation of what it feels like to actually, have this crazy urge to gamble despite being in debt and you're going to use the family's life savings, when they speak about that, it's so real. And I think that's what you're saying it's just real. It's raw.
Yes. There's no filter on it. So what I mean to say is, with the stories that you've shared in this book and the interviews that you've conducted, it's so important for everyone, for them to share their stories, which they have, but also as a reader, and I've read your book, and it's very fascinating, but to view their stories and experiences without pre-thoughts or without prejudgment. I think that's so important. You're going into that book, you're reading the text for what it is, but also you're not going into it thinking, oh, this is a perception I have of that person, or I would never do that, because you're all going to have your own judgments and feelings. But it's so important to go into it without judgment. And I think the way in which you've conducted these interviews in such a raw and earnest way, it's direct, it's earnest, as I've said, and also it's raw. And I think that's so important. So kudos to you on that part.
No, appreciate that. Appreciate that you've read it and you felt like that. And it is supposed to be making you and me a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
And we've almost got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
I think that's what you're leaning towards, right?
Yes.
It's like, okay, let's go there. And sometimes we've got to be in that frame of mind. We've got to maybe center ourselves to be able to, listen to, or I suppose we're bearing witness, aren't we? We're bearing witness.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, we're just like, okay, we're going to bear witness to this story, hold them with the non-judgmental attitude.
Yes.
Because in truth, anyone can fall victim to vice is what we need to conclude. And those that think we're immune from anything pernicious like that are just in illusion.
Yes.
So that's the best antidote is to actually learn from someone who's gone through it, rather than having to go through it again, having to go through it yourselves to then have to come out of it. Okay, learn from these other stories, because that's where the wisdom is. Yeah.
And continuing on with wisdom, purpose, and fulfillment, how can our listeners align their daily habits with their deeper purpose?
So daily habits, yes. So first of all, maybe defining what a deeper purpose is for someone would be key and essential. It might be like better physical health. It might be better relationships. It might be improving social position. So set that up as like the deeper meaning or purpose, and then look at what the milestones are towards that. And I personally use a habit tracker. I have this little habit tracker, and I've got to do a certain amount of sit-ups and make sure I've eaten a certain way. And I just do a little tick box, and then at the end of the month, I give it to my kids, and they work out the percentage. So it becomes like a bit of a game, and they can say, "Oh, you got 40% on that one," or "Oh, you did well on that one, you got 70%." So it becomes like a community building thing where, I put myself under the microscope.
Yes.
And, this month you didn't do so many press ups, Dad. So make it fun, like you were saying about you make things too robotic and you lose the passion.
Yes.
But have some sort of way of tracking your milestones, celebrating your milestones as well. That's important. Honoring the milestones. Like, okay, well, I've got to here now. Let me just honor that in some sort of way, and then you can then hopefully get to where you want to get to.
And what daily or weekly rituals help you stay inspired and grounded?
So from my tradition of Bhakti Yoga, we tend to wake up, supposed to traditionally wake up just before sunrise, but it's a bit different in in Britain where it changes so often. But wake up nice and early and do some meditation, some mantra meditation, and then some sort of gratitude. Symbol of gratitude for us would be, we light some incense. So one of the elements. So we've got earth, fire, water, something like that. For us, we have like a deity or a picture of, we have Krishna in our home, and anyone can have whatever they feel represents the universe to them or something bigger. And then so every morning, I've been doing it continuously for over 20 years, just a little bit of incense and water or some flowers, just as a gratitude to say, okay, you've given me so much, and here's a small token of my appreciation. And that just helps me feel connected, start my day like that, before all the chaos begins.
And finally, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self about passion, perseverance, and wisdom, what would that advice be?
That's a nice question. This might be a spoiler for you, sorry, but at the end of my book, I point out the fact that wisdom is like reaching the North Pole, but love is the North Star. Mm-hmm. So wisdom only takes us so far.
Yes.
But love is actually what we need. So knowledge evolves into wisdom, and compassion, that is a seed, and the fruit of that seed is love. Mm-hmm. So I would say that to my younger self, because I don't know, I think maybe I was probably a bit too disciplined, maybe, or maybe had priorities mixed up. But it all levels out in the end, hopefully, as long as you're introspective.
Thank you for joining us on Open Comments. It's been great to talk to you about connecting wisdom, passion, vice, and virtue. Now, before we end this episode, would you like to leave our listeners with any last words, feelings, or sentiments?
So there's something my dad always used to say. He said, go as far as you can see, and when you get there, you'll see further. If anyone wants to get my book, it's available on Amazon. It's Hard Road to Wisdom, and I'm on LinkedIn, so Jesal Pankhania. Happy to have conversations with you around wisdom and how to develop it.
Perfect. Thank you so much once again, Jesal, for joining us on Open Comments. Stay safe, and to all our listeners again, happy listening, and we'll catch you soon for the next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.